It's called the Narrow Bridge Tour.
That's a phrase from a famous Hassidic folk song in which goes, all the world is a narrow bridge. The main thing is not to be afraid. And what has characterized life for Jews and Christians in this part of the world has been, especially in the last 100 years, is life is quite risky and frightening and dangerous, and actually it's a matter of life and death. And at the same time, we should not be afraid.
David Pileggi leads the Anglican Christ Church in Jerusalem. Each year he brings Christians from around the world here to explore the 1,000-year history of the country's Jewish people and the influence they still have today on Jewish communities around the world and Israel.
We come to this country to study Jewish life, Jewish-Christian relations, the Holocaust, and in particular we really want to ask the question, why did so many ordinary people do such horrible things? And at the same time, why did so many ordinary people do such courageous things?
CBN News joined Pileggi and about 20 Christians from various backgrounds on his most recent tour.
This is not your usual tourist trip of coming to Europe and seeing castles and gardens and pretty things. It's a little different. It's very different.
Touching the wall of the Warsaw Ghetto, standing on the dock where Jews would soon enter the Sobibor extermination camp, walking through woods along the train tracks to Treblinka, or visiting the deadly concentration camp at Majdanek.
This is about what happened to the Jewish community in Poland that for 1,000 years got along quite well with non-Jews, and then when World War II came, was completely extinguished from this nation.
It includes stories of Jewish communities told in the cities and towns where they lived in eastern Poland, like the story of Tykocin.
We're in this town as a group to discover why were Jews here in such large numbers. I mean, we're in a very rural part of the world.
Invited here by the Polish nobility more than 800 years ago to help develop the country, these Jewish people thrived, and by the eve of World War II had grown to 3.5 million, the world's largest Jewish community.
Many Polish aristocrats, they had estates in rural areas, and Jews managed those estates, collected taxes for them, did any number of things, and ultimately helped the Polish aristocracy grow food and take that food up the Polish river system and to export it to different places around the world. And Poland grew economically and politically really thanks to the help of the Jewish people.
In August 1941, however, the Nazis rounded up the Jews of Tykocin and told them they were going to the ghetto in Białystok. Instead, the Nazis marched or drove them out of town to a nearby forest. Overnight, here in this beautiful forest, Nazis murdered more than 2,400 Jews and buried them where they dropped. Part of the community that had helped build Poland's economy wiped out in a day.
It's very hard to look at the Holocaust and to think about the suffering people. I think one of the great things about this particular trip is that we're also studying the Jewish heritage site.
Thousands of these mass graves can be seen throughout Central and Eastern Europe. Even before the death camps or gas chambers, the shooting deaths of millions of Jews and others became known as the Holocaust by bullets. At some of these sites, participants recited the Kaddish, the Jewish mourner's prayer that proclaims the greatness of God. Attorney Raymond Daig says the lesson he sees is how it could happen again.
It's a frightening prospect. We all say to ourselves, oh, I would never do that. I could never be there. But human nature is such that we have to be forever vigilant because these kinds of things can happen and did with a vengeance.
There are also heroic stories, like the famous Oskar Schindler, who saved Jews by insisting he needed them in his factory, that today houses a museum. In Krakow, Tadeusz Pankiewicz owned a pharmacy in an area designated as the Jewish ghetto. As a non-Jew, he and his staff were supposed to leave, but he fought to stay. They observed the Nazis rounding up the Jews, humiliating them and shooting them. Under penalty of death, they secretly tried to help sick and starving Jews and even hid some Jews in the pharmacy. Bible translator Professor Brad Young says it's important to be in the place where things happened to fully understand the history.
We must learn the history of the Jewish people and understand the connection that we have as Christians with the suffering of the Jewish people in history.
Bishop Julian Dobbs, a longtime student of Jewish history, says he came to Poland because so much of it happened here.
I believe that we understand our Christian faith more fully when we do so through a Hebraic lens. Therefore, understanding the place of the Jewish people, both in our faith through the scriptures, but also in the history of the Jewish people, deepens our understanding of our own faith journey.
Pileggi says for years he taught people about the Jewishness of Jesus and Jewish roots of Christianity, but it seemed artificial that interest in the Jewish people stopped when the New Testament was written.
And of course, God still has his purposes for the Jewish people. He still remains in covenant with them. I think it's quite important that we have a basic understanding of their history.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Warsaw, Tykocin, and Krakow, Poland.